Is the N80 HiLux overpriced, or is it just as reliable as its older brothers? Welcome to our new series. In this series, we're going to be going in depth, right down to the nitty gritty on heaps of different models of four-wheel drives. We're going to be telling you what to look out for when you're buying used and if it is a good buy or a bad buy. For episode 1, we're going to be looking at the N80 HiLux. We're down in the Greys lot today in Brizzy, and they have so many of these things down here.
In this used N80 deep dive, we're going to be covering everything you need to know and look out for when you're considering buying one of these used four-wheel drives. We're going to give you an idea of what model you should be looking for, what issues these cars have had over the years, and how much you can expect to pick one up for. Let's get into it.
Quick little backstory for those of you that don't know, this is the latest generation of Hilux. It took over from the N70 from 2015 onwards. Now, Hiluxes have always had a super good name for reliability and durability, for being a trade to you and a tough four-wheel drive. And that is exactly why the first couple of years on the market, the N80 topped the charts. It was Australia's #1 selling vehicle. So if you're looking at buying an N80 secondhand, it's probably going to be 3 main models you're going to be looking at. The base model, the Workmate, the SR and the SR5. Now the Workmate, definitely the most budget-friendly model, but there's a couple of things you got to remember. They're available in 2 engines and they're both smaller than the other models. Manual and manual transmissions, but the later model ones, you can get them in automatics. Now, the next step up from the Workmate is the SR HiLux. These come with the larger engines. They are a step up from the Workmate, but they're still quite basic. They've got the external tie-down rails on the tub, they've got latches on the side, and they're pretty basic on the inside. Now, the next step up from the SR is the SR5. This is famous across all Hilux models, and what do we know about it? Well, it's a luxurious one, I guess you could say. It comes with heaps more creature comforts, and inside they almost feel a bit more like a car to drive than the old trucky SR and Workmate. Now, there is actually 2 other Hilux options available. There is the Rogue and the GR Sport, but you might struggle to find these on the second-hand market at the moment, as they've only come out the last couple of years. They do come packed with heaps more features from the factory, but to make sure you certainly pay for them. Which model would I pick if I was going to buy a second-hand Hilux? Well, being a four-wheel driver, that means one thing. I'm going to want to do modifications to the vehicle. So I'd probably pick an SR. It doesn't have as many nice things as SR5, but I'm probably going to modify a heap of them things anyway, and maybe even take the older tub off. So I reckon SR would be the pick for me. You save yourself a bit of coin, which means money for mods. And the best part about it, no matter which model you buy, you've got the Toyota tax. Obviously, you've got to pay it when you buy it, but that means when you sell it, there's going to be hardly any depreciation. Another good thing about paying that Toyota tax is parts availability. They say Australia is cruiser country or Toyota country, so no matter where you are, within a couple of days, I can almost guarantee you'll be able to get the parts you need to fix your Toyota Hilux and have it back on the tracks. Probably one of the biggest ticket items when you're buying a second-hand vehicle of any type is the engine. Now, in the N80 HiLux, there is 4 engines they come with: a 2.7 litre petrol, a 4 litre petrol V6, a 2.4 litre diesel, and the 2.8 litre diesel, most commonly found in all the ones that you're probably going to be buying. Now, there was a couple of issues with these early on in the piece, up to about 2018. There was DPF issues, and they have all been sorted now. So the earlier ones, they changed the exhaust system and some of the software to sort these problems out. It was mainly on the cars doing shorter city drives, not getting out in the longer drives. They were just getting a big build up on there and never a chance to do a burn. So from 2018 onwards, they've actually been fitted with a manual burn off button. So if you're not doing any big drives and you see this icon come off your dash flashing, you know it's time for a burn. What you can do is, if you don't have a big drive in mind, park it up, press the button, and it'll do a burn off while it's sitting there idling. Also, the earlier models had dramas with the timing chains. They could get quite rattly, skip teeth, and cause engine damage, but that is all sorted now and sorted under warranty. One more problem with the earlier models up to about the end of 2017, maybe the start of 18, was the factory turbos. They had a very small shaft and they did break, but that has also been changed in the later models and upgraded to a ball bearing module. So all of those 3 problems I just spoke about are actually fixed under Toyota factory warranty. So if you're looking at a second-hand car, chances are there's nothing to worry about, but just do keep it in mind if you're buying one of the earlier models. Another good thing to look for when you're buying a used N80, especially the 2.8 diesel engine, is if it has a catch can fitted. These engines can really benefit from a catch can because they are known for getting very clogged up with carbon on the intake manifold. Now, if it doesn't have one, it's not the end of the world at all. Just means you probably should factor fitting one into your budget and getting an intake clean into your budget, and then the engine will be good for many years to come. Now, these 2.8 litre diesels don't make a heap of power, but they do return great fuel figures, which is a good plus. And also it means that there is a fair bit in the tune. So if you don't want to tickle these up a bit, there is plenty of room to make them have a bit of get up and go. How many kilometers is too many kilometers when you're buying one of these? Well, it's a Toyota, so it doesn't matter how many kilometers it's got, it's good to go, some would say. But a common rule for most common rail engines is around the 200,000, 250,000 kilometer mark. You're probably going to want to look at getting the injectors changed. Just for peace of mind, make sure the system is all clean and running fine, and that means the car is going to be good for many years to come. So just make sure you factor the kilometers and a few things like that into your budget, and you'll be putting up with this Toyota liability for many years to come. Underneath the N70, driveline, brake suspension, all that sort of stuff, they're still a relatively new car, so there shouldn't be too many problems to pick up under here if the vehicle has been well looked after. We've got another video on the channel with heaps of tips and tricks on buying used, so make sure you go and check that out for some little things to pick up underneath here. Now, some pretty cool things about this N80 HiLux is it's the first ever HiLux model to come with a factory rear diff lock. Now that's quite common these days, but still it's the first HiLux that's ever come with that. So that is very handy. That's one thing you can tick off your mods list, already done, rear locker done. Probably the only other problem I can find with these N80s is the factory Toyota clutch. We know they're not great. They're not great in the 79s. They're not great in the Prados. They're also not that crash hot in the Hiluxes. So if you're buying a manual and it's lower kilometers and the clutch hasn't been replaced, make sure you factor that into your budget. Inside the big N80, it almost feels a bit tacked together. This dash has a hell of a lot going on. It's got a big curve here, it's got a curve there, it's got a line across here, it's got what looks like an iPad blue tack to the dash. The technology on this head unit is very far behind. Even the new models don't have Apple CarPlay. The navigation is very glitchy, a few things like that. It all definitely does work, it's just I'm not sure if it's really what should be in a $40,000 vehicle. Driving position is good. The buttons, they're all in sort of good spots. You've got rear locker here, you've got your traction control off, you've got your full drive dial, everything is nice and easy to get to. But just sitting back and looking at it, you're gonna spend probably most of your time in here in the car. It almost feels a little bit tacked together. In the back of the car here, and this is an SR5, it's kind of a little bit of a letdown. There is no aircon vents in the back for passengers at all, no charge points or anything. One thing I do like is the sitting position. When you're sitting back here, you are sitting higher than the driver and the passenger in the front. You can see over the bonnet. It's quite a good position. You still have quite a bit of headroom. This seat's quite far back and I've still got some legroom, so that is good. Another thing that I don't really like is this back seat doesn't come down. It's fixed to the back wall. Obviously, these ones here do come up and there's little storage containers under here, but you know, most modern dual cabs, you can fold the seat down. People have slimline batteries, 12-volt setups, compressors, everything behind there. This is fixed to the wall. So not only is it not useful for any of that stuff, it's super hard to put seat covers on. There is a positive to these fixed seats though. They've got ISOFIX points on all 3 seats. So if you've got kids and you need to put a kid's seat in, that is very handy to keep them nice and safe.
Overall, while the interior does feel tacked together, there hasn't been any major issues with it, and compared to other four-wheel drives, the Hilux's interior is actually pretty good. One of the things you have to look out for in any four-wheel drive is rust. Thankfully, we've got Damien from Raptor to give you some tips on what to look for.
I'm Damo and I'm the bloke who wants to bring workshop overalls back. I often get asked by family and friends to have a look at vehicles before they buy them, so here's a few tips and tricks that I use that might help you when you next buy your dream four-wheel drive. Rust is a really important thing to look for when you're inspecting a vehicle because it can be really easy to hide and hard to find, and it can cost you thousands if you miss it. So there's rust I like and there's some rust I don't like, and this area on the top of the guard here is the stuff I like because it's really easy to fix. Basically all I'd need to do here is give it a really good mechanical sand, give it a coat of Brunox, prime it, paint it, all good. The rust I don't like is rust that's in box sections and areas that are quite hard to get to or have hidden sections behind them. Those areas you really need to know your skill level to try and fix them. So sometimes that might need a professional and that means money. So the areas I like to look at first are these sill panels and all the floors and bottoms of doors and areas like that that are structural, because if they're no good, we're in trouble. So under here is pretty wet, which is pretty standard for a Hilux, but by the look of it, it's all structurally okay, so I reckon that'll be fine. So the next thing I like to do is open up the doors and have a good look at the bottom of the doors. We want to make sure that all the seam sealer is still in there. There's no bulging rust or anything like that. And also, I like to check to make sure that the drain holes are all clear, because if the drain holes have water in them, then that means rust. These older Hiluxes are known to have a little bit of rust down in the bottom of the guards. They've got a little bit of a box section behind this area, and that tends to make the rust come through. This one here is actually in quite good nick. It's got a little bit of surface rust, and I think that's very easy to clean up. It's good to have a really good look at all of the subframes and the chassis and make sure there's no rusty holes or any damage, and have a good look at the floor of the cab. Make sure there's no rust there and no welds broken. For a car of this age, this one looks pretty good. So one of the other areas I really like to look at on these old Hiluxes is certainly the radiator support panel. These can quite often have a bit of rust down on the mounts and also on the bottom of the support. So important to give it a little bit of a shake, make sure it's all okay, and just double check that there's no rust there, because you don't want your radiator falling out. So we've just given this car a really good looking over, and it's not perfect, but I don't think there's anything you can't fix, so I think it'll be a good buy.
Now, let's talk price. It is super hard to put an actual price on these things due to the prices fluctuating so much, but if you spend between 30 and 40 grand, chances are you're going to get yourself a pretty good N70. If you go to the lower bracket around 30 grand, you're probably going to get an SR, possibly an SR5, but it's going to have higher Ks, around the 200 to 300,000. If you're going to spend 40 grand, maybe upwards a little bit of that, you're probably going to get a lower kilometer SR, definitely, maybe a lower kilometer SR5 with a couple of tasteful mods. As we mentioned earlier on in the video, we are down in the Grays lot today looking at these N80s behind us. Now, we're going to put the prices below in this video of what these ones sold for. The beauty of shopping at Grays is you can come down and look at all the vehicles before you place a bid. So if you're in the market for used N80, make sure you jump on Grays, have a look online, maybe even come down to one of the yards and have a look at a few. With all that said and done, one thing I reckon is you need to actually make sure you're buying the car for the right purposes. Now, if you're a die-hard Toyota fan and you're buying a Toyota because they're unbreakable and you don't mind paying the Toyota tax, go for it. But if you're new to the full drive scene or new to the Toyota scene and you're only buying one because your mate is in your ear saying, Toyota unbreakable, pay the tax, maybe you should rethink it, because personally, I think there could be some better things out there for your money. Something that's a bit nicer to sit in, a bit nicer to drive, and maybe you might even be able to buy a car a little bit cheaper and have some money spare for mods. In saying that, I'm gonna throw you over to my Toyota expert mate, Jocko, because he would be in my ear telling me that Toyota tax is worth it, and he's gonna give you a few handy hints on buying an N80 Hilux.
Thanks, Jesse, and I can see you in one of these Hiluxes one day. But anyway, the mighty N80 Hilux, super popular and for good reason. So as mentioned, there are a couple of things to look out for mechanically on these vehicles, particularly on the earlier models, but well-known tuning shops like Performance Tourers do a lot of work with these engines. They get good reliability and horsepower out of them, as well as a bunch of upgrades with things like turbochargers. So something to look for, you can get good power out of these engines. As Jesse said, they come with a bit of a Toyota tax, but there's a reason why they're so popular. If you're prepared to pay a little bit more for that Toyota tax, and you found one that's a pretty good example, you should get reliable, trouble-free four-wheel driving for years to come. Anyway, Jesse, hope that helps, mate.
Well, there you go. There is my mate Jocko's few helpful hints on buying an N80 Hilux. Coming from a Nissan man, this is a pretty big call, but I don't think you can really go wrong when buying an N80 Hilux. They're still relatively new to the second-hand market. Not too many have been flogged, they've all been well looked after, and if you stick with that $30,000 to $40,000 budget, you're going to get yourself a pretty tidy N80 Hilux. So we said at the start, should you buy one or should you not buy one? I reckon if you're happy to pay the Toyota tax, you definitely should buy yourself an N80 Hilux. These things are good, they're tough, they're rugged, they're super strong, and they're a good deal. Well, that's the first episode done of this series. We hope you enjoyed it. If any of you guys want us to do a video on a specific vehicle, chuck it in the comments below and we'll see what we can do for you. Now, that's all I've got time for today because I've got plenty of other cars to look at in this yard. There might even be a few Nissans down the back. But anyway, I'll see you next time on 4 Drive 24/7.